Notes on research methods. So, research is a structured and logical quest aimed at uncovering truths and resolving problems through a systematic methodology. It's not merely to search for information, it's a discipline, it's an approach that has multiple formulated steps, which include hypothesis testing, gathering of data, analyzing, interpreting results, and finally, drawing conclusions to establish general principles and theories. So, research methods have various disciplines, including natural sciences, social sciences, humanities, business studies, and can be categorized into two mainly basic, which is pure research, and applied research. So these are the two main categories within which research can be categorized. So here are some of the features that research should have. Number one, it should be systematic, meaning it should follow a certain set of procedures. Number two, it must be logic, meaning it must be based on what we call deductive and inductive reasoning. It must be empirical, meaning it should involve observations and evidence from what others have done. And research must be replicable, meaning it must be repeated and verified. It must be objective, meaning it must be free from bias or personal interpretation. So it is important in that it helps to solve real life problems and contributes to the body of knowledge and theory development. Research is informative in decision making and policy practice. Now, in terms of formulation of a research problem, we must understand that research acts as the foundation of any scientific inquiry. It's a well-formulated problem that directs focus. Research has methodology and outcomes, and some of the factors that affect the choice of research could be its social relevance in addressing urgent and social, economic, and political issues, availability of literature in that it ensures that prior work existed on which we are building on. Remember, research is there to nullify, qualify, and add on what is already there. So it should also have aspect of feasibility, meaning it must consider time, resources, and skills. Funding and sponsorship, there should be available financial support. So there should also be interest in the person participating in the research and expertise. So not everyone can do research. So steps in conducting a research problem is that you must identify the broad topic area, you must review the background of the literature, you must also narrow down to a specific issue and formulate the actual problem. So you finally have to justify and make the delimitation of the scope. Now, literature review and the framework. So literature review is simply a comprehensive survey of previous scholarly work related to a topic. It helps the researcher to identify the gaps, to establish a theoretical or conceptual framework, and also avoiding duplication. Literature review will help us identify or define the variables in the conceptual framework and the operational terms that will be used. We have what we call a conceptual framework. A conceptual framework is a an outline that outlines relationships among variables and also guides in how the data will be collected. So we have three components of the literature review. We have the general literature review, the conceptual, and the theoretical literature review. So these frameworks are important. On the conceptual or framework, it is simply a logic relationship that shows how the variables interrelate. We said it's a foundation upon which research hinges. Okay, then we go to um, the theoretical framework. Theoretical framework are the roots of your study, where existing theories emanate. It explains the rationale behind these expected relationships. So we have a number of theories that we can look up to. Motivation theories, um, we have equity theories. So sources from which literature review can be conducted includes articles, books, reports, thesis, journals, and also reports from companies. So these must be up to date, especially the past decade. Must be peer reviewed in terms of quality and abstracts for relevance. So peer reviewed literature helps you navigate the problem of error. Some of you will have mistakes, and one of the excuses you would give is that it will not uh, reviewed for quality purposes. So because of these AI detectors that the school require you to clean your works with, you discover that most of your content will be distorted, and you need somebody to review your literature. As I'm reading, please take note that I'm preparing you for questions that are coming in the test. So I'll be a little bit fast so that as I get to go through the test, this is a quick can you remember of what we've been looking at. So please take note of these key points. Annie. Okay, so variables in research. The variables we talk,
Taking note.
um, variables that we talk about in research would either be independent variables, dependent variables, extraneous confounding variables. We also have mediating and moderating variables. So the independent variables are actually the cause or the input, whereas the dependent variable are the outcome, the output or the effect. Extraneous variables are external factors, not only of primary interest. Okay, then confounding variables are simply variables that correlate with the independent variable, which is IV, and the dependent variable, which is DV. And these can either distort the results. So a good research must have clear definitions and operationalization of these variables. And these variables can either be qualitative or quantitative depending on the method that you're going to adopt. We also have an important element called hypothesis. And a hypothesis is simply an assumption, not an assumption, it's a proposed explanation for a phenomenon which specifies relationship between two or more variables. It comes in as a null and alternative hypothesis. When we're dealing with a null hypothesis, it means that we have no relationship at all. Alternative signifies the presence of a relationship. So hypothesis can either be tentative, empirical, okay? So these the hypothesis must have the following characteristics. It must be tentative, it must be empirically be testable, it must be clear, it must as well be specific. So hypothesis and conceptual framework are married. Because from the conceptual framework, you're able to tabulate your hypothesis, how these relationships interrelate in terms of the dependent and the dependent variables. We also have the moderating variables and confounding variables, extraneous variables. So you need to understand these key variables that we have in research. So far, are we together? Any questions before I proceed?
It's clear.
Okay. So the functions of a hypothesis basically is to guide your data collection and to promote objectivity. It must also determine the testing methods. So quantitative and qualitative methods have their own strengths and weaknesses. For quantitative, mainly we're talking about numeric data that corresponds to a phenomenon. Its strengths are that it allows you to conduct a hypothesis test and will enable you to replicate the experiment and provide generalization for large samples. It also provides statistically analyzable data. The only disadvantages or limitations is that it's not ideal for small samples less than 30 and for unique populations. And also, it ignores contextual detail. Just numbers cannot explain some detail that you can get from qualitative information. It is less exploratory compared to qualitative research. We go to qualitative research. Now, qualitative focuses on you obtaining meaning, context, and experiences through structured data like interviews, observations, characteristics that qualitative data has is that it's flexible, descriptive, and thematic. So when you're dealing with quantitative data, it involves you having structured tools of analysis and also having measures of frequency, uh, causality, that is all in quantitative data. So when we're dealing with quantitative data, we have examples of sampling methods. We have what we call probability sampling methods, which include purposive, simple random, stratified, systematic, all to do with numbers. All right. There's no difference in the data collection. The data collection methods that are applicable to quantitative include surveys and interviews. All right. For quantitative, it is random. Then we're dealing with analysis. mainly quantitative, we're dealing with statistical. For qualitative, we're dealing with thematic. Quantitative, we're dealing with surveys in terms of data collection, whereas qualitative, we're dealing with interviews. Sampling, when you're dealing with quantitative, it's random. Qualitative, it's recursive. So in terms of designs, so research design is simply a blueprint or a plan that is used for data collection and analysis. So it ensures that research is structured and is coherent. There are different types of designs that we have. We have exploratory, we have descriptive, we have explanatory, we have experimental. So these are the different types of research designs. So the process that we have when we're dealing with research is that we need to identify the problem, review the literature, formulate the hypothesis, choose a design and methods, collect data, and interpret it and give a conclusion. So this is what we call a scientific research. Okay, so I had explained in depth in my previous classes what exploratory, descriptive designs are, but this week I will re-explain them in depth. Now, the logical process that is involved in research is what we call deductive and inductive reasoning. So, deductive moves from general to specific, whereas inductive moves from specific to general conclusions. So, under deductive logic, the key is hypothesis testing, whereas under inductive logic, it is important for us to hinge our study on theory building. What are tools that we use in these research frameworks? So some of these tools that we use to guide our inquiry and interpreting these are the conceptual and theoretical frameworks. The conceptual framework is helpful in defining the variables and the expected outcomes of these relationships. Where theoretical, we are looking at the roots where these theories emanate. Unfortunately, in this context, for theoretical, we don't really consider the time. We can use 1950 because some of the theories are old and outdated. So under conceptual framework, you have two types of frameworks. We have what we call the adopted and adapted. What's the difference between the two? What is an adopted and what is an adapted? So adopted, you get it as it is. Adapted, you manipulate it to fit what you want. Okay. So now we go to the ethics in research. So ethics in research that we have are informed consent, where you need to ensure that the participants freely agree. Anonymity, where you protect their identity. Confidentiality, you secure the information. Voluntary participation, and you avoid harm. So these are why you are asked to sign the ethical clearance to ensure that you uphold these norms. Should there be an eventuality where you did not follow this, the school can ask whether or not you had followed that through. All right, so scientific research. Scientific research method is a rigorous way of investigating a phenomenon through observing and experimentation and analysis. It aims at eliminating invalid prepositions, also improving interpretation, and ensure that there's reliability and validity. These are two important concepts that we look at. So the steps that are involved in scientific research are observations, formulating hypotheses, experimentation, data analysis, and drawing conclusions. So this is a scientific approach that I've been talking about, and the characteristics of this process are that it must have an empirical um, aspect, meaning it should be based on what others have done. When we say empirical review, it simply means looking at what others have done, what methods they use, what findings they did. That is empirical literature. Systematic, meaning it should follow a certain sequence. Uh, Critical, meaning it must have methods and outcomes that are evaluated. We are critiquing, we are looking at what was done and what methods were used. Okay. Controlled, meaning we must minimize the error. We must have an aspect where you understand what probable errors could have been and how you ensure to overcome them. All right, so good research must be rooted on the foundations of theoretical frameworks, philosophical foundations, methodological soundness, um, ethical considerations, and design. So now let's look at some of the questions here that we will try to understand. Okay. So question number one, a review,
Very well.
a review of related literature should sort out the information into a dash framework. A review of related literature should sort out information into conceptual, framework, universal, contextual, theoretical, selective. Which one of those?
Theoretical.
Theoretical, correct. Okay, an advantage of journal articles in this review is that number one, reading abstracts of articles will help select relevant articles. Number two, there are many journals to choose from in most fields. Number three, it provides up-to-date information, all of them or none of them. What is one advantage of using journal articles in literature review? By the way,
Reading abstracts of the articles helps select relevant articles.
yes, that's correct. But you also need to understand that at masters you need to review about 60 journal articles. All right. So which one of the following is one of the strengths of quantitative research? Hypothesis testing, direct comparison, replication, none of them, all of them. We talked about the strengths of quantitative. Quantitative, what is one of the strengths of quantitative? It has hypothesis testing, it has direct comparison of results, it has replication, all of them, or small samples. Which one is not? Sorry.
Small samples
Mhm.
is not.
Yes, it's not. Because hypothesis testing, we said it is, right? Comparison of
Mm.
results can. Replication, it can. Small samples is for which type?
It's for qualitative.
Qualitative. Correct. I mentioned that. All right. Are we following from what I was just teaching? Dash prevents a researcher from blind research and intellectual wandering. Research tools, study sample, data analysis, research data, and research design. So which of these prevents a researcher from blind search and intellectual wandering? Is it research tools? Is it study sample? Is this data analysis? Is this research data? Is this uh, research design? What prevents a researcher from blind search?
Hmm. Research design.
Research design? Okay. Anyone else? Okay. Which one? And why?
I think it's research design because research design looks at what method you're going to use to collect, and it's kind of like restricts you so that you don't stray.
Okay. Is that what the others are thinking? Very interesting. Yes, correct. Research design, because research design is what provides you with a clear structure and strategy on how research will be conducted, because it includes research questions, research objectives, methodology, whether it's quantitative or qualitative, sampling methods, and data collection techniques. So uh, it's a structured plan that focuses on efficient and systematic. Thus, we can qualify it. Okay, great. Um, what is not a function of hypothesis? A, replaces research problem. B, enables specifically uh, specifically enables to specifically conclude what is true or false. Um, C, it ensures information needed. What information is needed will be collected. None of them. It provides focus to research problem and enhances objectivity. So what's the function of a hypothesis? It replaces the problem. It enables specifically to conclude what is true and what will be false. It ensures what information is needed to be collected. It also provides focus to research problem and enhances objectivity. Okay, which one is not a function of hypothesis?
It doesn't replace the research problem.
Research problem.
Yes, it doesn't replace it doesn't research because these answers are correct. It will enable to conclude what is true or false. Okay, by the null hypothesis and alternative hypothesis. It also ensures on information, so it gives you a guide of how data collection must be done. And it also provides focus to the problem and objectivity. Yes, correct. Okay. A systematic step-by-step procedure following logical process of reasoning is induction, deduction, experiment, observation, evidence-based inquiry. Step-by-step procedure, okay, following logic process of reasoning. Anyone?
Evidence-based inquiry.
Evidence-based inquiry. Okay. Anyone else?
Okay, for me, I need you to explain this one a bit.
The question or um the answer?
Um, Both, I think, because here I'm looking at experiment and observation. They all follow a certain procedure, and it also requires you to have a logical process of reasoning.
Mhm. The answer should be deduction. Okay. A step-by-step procedure following logical process of reasoning. Okay. What they say is difference between inductive and deductive reasoning. So we know that deduction is what involves to deduce. It involves you um, re reasoning in a systematic manner. Okay, where you have to follow from the premise. That is your unit one. If those of you who have unit one, it's typically used in scientific research um, because it's a structured way of reasoning. So there's what we call induction. Induction is reasoning from specific observations to general. All right. Then we talked about experiment, which involves you testing, but not there's no logic thinking in there. Observation, you're just gathering data, which isn't step by step. You're just observing what people are doing. Evidence-based inquiry, you're just using decision based on evidence, other research findings, but it can be in a broader rather than a specific logical manner. But in deduction involves you having to deduce in a logical reasoning in a systematic manner, step by step, where the conclusions should logically follow themselves from premises to assumptions. So it typically is used in scientific research where you're looking at structured way of reasoning. Okay. So induction, remember I talked about in the notes what is deductive and inductive. So when you're thinking from a specific to a general, that is induction. Okay, but deduction, you're using logic thinking there. So
Mhm.
yeah, I hope that is clear. So the answer is what? Deduction. Okay. Which is the best, which is the which option is least related to qualitative approach of
Mhm.
research? Inferential, descriptive, unstructured, open-ended questions, and flexible. Which one is the least related to qualitative? hmm Which one?
Mhm.
Descriptive.
Which one is least? So qualitative and quantitative, we talked about the differences, eh? So um, we must understand that inferential statistics is mainly to do with what? Numerical analysis in quantitative research to test a hypothesis, to generalize your results from sample populations. So in this case, it is least equated to qualitative because qualitative is non-numeric. It involves you using open-ended questions. There's flexibility, there's unstructuredness, there's semi-structured format. So descriptive statistics might occasionally appear to be qualitative in nature because you want to summarize the participants' demographics and simple patterns. Unstructured, open-ended, flexible, these ones are directly qualitative without second doubt. So the correct choice is inferential statistics. Are we together? Clara, are we together? So
Yes, we are.
qualitative research is associated with unstructured, flexible, open, all of them, none of them, measurement variables. I'm just from explaining this indirectly. So it's unstructured, flexible, and open, isn't it? Okay. So um, Dash is a research tool intended to assist researchers develop awareness and understanding of the situation under scrutiny and to communicate the readers the constructs of the study. Problem statement, conceptual framework, theoretical framework, research hypothesis. So which one is a research tool that is intended to assist the researcher to develop awareness and understanding of the situation under scrutiny and also to communicate the readers the constructs of the study? Which one is it? I taught this. Please critically think through.
Conceptual framework.
Conceptual framework. Yes, conceptual framework. Because it helps the researchers to identify, it helps researchers to develop and articulate the key concepts of the relationships in the study. Therefore, it will help to provide clarity and some deeper understanding in the situation or phenomenon being investigated. So the conceptual framework is what helps to um, communicate these constructs to the reader. It will help to direct the direction of these ones. Whereas a problem statement is there to it clearly states what the problem is, but it doesn't itself explain the constructs. The theoretical framework, it's the roots of the research. It looks at the existing theories rather than explicitly communicating the new constructs in there. The hypothesis, it presents the testable prediction rather than understanding the constructs. So conceptual framework is the correct one. So our answer is B. All right. So which one of the following attributes is related to quantitative research? Explains prevalence, incidence, and extent and nature of the issues. It covers multiple issues, but assembles required information. It describes and discusses issues and phenomenon. It explores experiences, meanings, and perceptions and feelings. So which one is an attribute of quantitative research? Which one is an attribute? Okay. Which one is an attribute of quantitative
C.
research? Okay. C. So answer in this context is A. So quantitative research we know is primarily for numeric data due to its statistical nature to measure and explain a phenomenon. So now, it being that case, it should be able to measure the prevalence, the incidence, the extent, the frequency, and the magnitude. When we're talking at option, let's start with option B, all of them is incorrect since in this case, not all listed attributes are quantitative. Option C, to say covers multiple issues but assembles required information is this one is ambiguous because it doesn't distinctly relate to either approach. Option D, which says describes and discusses issues of a phenomenon. This one also relates more to qualitative description and the discussion of a phenomenon. E, which says explores experiences, meanings, perceptions, and feelings. This one clearly states that qualitative research emphasizes on meanings, perceptions, and feelings. So our answer is A, because it explains the prevalence, incidence, extent, and nature of issues. So quantitative research is primarily for numeric measures. All right, so we look at following question. By the way, they are jumbled, so we need to understand the concept. What is not a function of literary view section in a written research report? To share the reader's results and other studies, to identify existing gaps in the knowledge, to relate the study to a larger and ongoing dialogue in the world's academia, to validate a test, a hypothesis theory, to identify a research problem. So which one is not a function of literary view of these ones here? Anyone? So one. So the
To validate a test hypothesis or theory.
to validate a test hypothesis or theory, that is not a function of literary view. Any other view?
To identify a research problem. That's E.
To identify a research problem is not a function of literary view. Any last thought? So that is D, correct? To validate a hypothesis or theory. That is correct. So the primary function of literary view, we said, are sharing what others have written. This is what? Empirical study. Identifying knowledge gaps is where we do literary review, so that we bring in what has been left out. The other is relating the study to a broader academic discourse. It's true to identify and to clarify research problems. So literary review in itself, it doesn't directly validate, okay, or test hypothesis or theories. It's hypothesis testing and theory validation. These ones occur through empirical research methods and data analysis. That's where we do the validation. Okay, that's why we have our findings. Okay, so the one that is inaccurate is what? Is D. Is that correct? Okay, so independent variable is defined as outcome variable, extraneous variable, change variable, confounding variable. Which one of the answers? And explain these. Mhm. And explain this. Independent variable, IV, is defined as what? Is it an outcome, extraneous, change variable, confounding. Which one is the correct answer? So an independent variable is a variable that the researcher will manipulate or change to observe the effect that it has on the dependent. Dependent is outcome. Okay, independent is input, which you are manipulating. So outcome here refers to the dependent variable. Okay, the manipulating the change variable is what we call the independent variable. Extraneous variable and confounding variables, these are variables that we aim to control or eliminate. They are just used to influence the dependent variable, and these ones will distort the results. So our answer is D, change variable. Okay, are we together? Okay, then we go to the next question. Effect in the causal relationship between variables is the dash variable. The effect in a causal effect relationship between variables is the dash variable. Confounding, moderate, dependent variable, independent variable, all of them, none of them. Okay, what's my answer? What's my answer?
Dependent variable.
What's our answer?
Dependent variable.
Dependent.
Dependent, what is the explanation?
A dependent variable. This is a variable that depends on the outcome of the variable of the dependent variable depends on the independent variable.
Okay, yes, correct. So the dependent variable is correct because it is the effect. Um, because it is what is influenced or changed by the independent variable. Okay? So in a cause and effect relationship, the dependent variable is the effect, whereas the independent variable is the cause. So the cause is what influences or produces change. Okay? The effect is the dependent variable. All right. So it's 20 hours now. I must end.